Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 313 with Stefan Grafstein. Stefan Grafstein is a coach, speaker, author, and adventurer. He's the founder of Live Ignited, facilitating human potential through adventure, ceremony, and mindfulness. He's been leading retreats and workshops to create more freedom, success, and meaning in life since 1999. He's been doing this for a while. He's a big wave surfer, backcountry snowboarder, class 5 river guide, kite surfer, and backcountry snow kiter. Award-winning cognitive neuroscience researcher. He has an MA in spiritual psychology and a BA in developmental psychology. During a battle with autoimmune disease early in his life, he developed a dedicated yoga and spiritual practice. Stefan now lives in balance, flow, disease-free. His journey has informed his life path and purpose. Along the way, he developed his own techniques called the retinal field meditation, 3 voices framework, and shamanic voice expression. And in this episode, you're going to hear we talk a lot about risk, and he's got this great metaphor for risk, ties in with adventure sports. And we talk about how to approach risk and what that means to creating an expanded version of yourself. So we're tying in concepts of adventure and spirituality. So because of his background in psychology, he pays a lot of attention to different mind states and how there are moments when you're free. He calls it the no mind state, when you're free of the chatter that's normally going on. And this is actually an important part to becoming a whole integrated individual. So in this episode, you're going to get some great adventure stories and some really fabulous personal insights that you can apply to your own life. Without further ado, here is Stefan Grafstein. Stefan Grafstein, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, and I think a great place to start will be you're telling me a little bit about how you used to take people on ski trips and coach them while you were skiing. And I've actually had a little bit of experience just coaching people like walking in the woods. Skiing is kind of like a little there's more going on. You're flying down a mountain, all these things. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that is like to coach someone while skiing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love doing it because I love to ski or snowboard. So just being able to be out, on a mountain while doing 2 things that I love is a beautiful gift. And what I've noticed is that when you sit on top of a mountain or in front of the ocean, there's this expansiveness of the visual field that we're looking at. There's a horizon line is so far out there, and there's, it's like an infinity. It's like looking into infinity. And I've likened it to maybe the experience of sitting with God, where there's this presence, there's this expansiveness, there's something different about sitting and looking out upon an endless horizon, an endless view that I believe is, if you ever lived in a beach town, and you go to the beach, you'll see people just sitting on the sand looking out at the sea, right? It's like, yeah. So there's something that opens when we have that experience of that vastness. And I think, first of all, it's such a powerful experience for people and allows for maybe more letting go, maybe more insight, versus sitting inside of a house or a box with windows. So I'll pull over and we'll sit down on top of the mountain. Typically what we'll do is we'll ski and we'll talk on the lift, and then we'll ski it's like 10 minutes down, 10 minutes up, depending on how fast you ski. So we'll chat for a few minutes on the lift about what they have that they want to work. And then when we get to a certain point, I'll say, okay, let's sit down. If we're really going to go deep. And my coaching is a lot of emotional process work. So, we'll often sit down and let out some tears on the snow and then ski down. And what I love about it is similar to if you do it on a hike, like you mentioned, you leave it there. It didn't happen in your room or in your office, and you don't revisit that spot ever again. Whatever happened in that moment is forever gone. And if it's a letting go, if it's a letting out of an emotion or some part of our history that we're, rewriting, it's a beautiful, experience of a living metaphor of leaving it on the mountain and then skiing down, going home and moving on.
Yeah, I'm just appreciating the structure of like being a skier myself. Like you've got those sort of up and down 10 minutes. You got the break, and then there's the lift time when people are talking, and then it's like the physically processing, like the movement. It's almost like a perfect setup to like get into an emotion and then like process it out and maybe repeat it a bunch of times.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've not lived on a ski mountain, but I imagine if I did, I would do all my coaching on the mountain. And additionally, doing some group work in the gondola. I think the gondola rides, they can be like sometimes 20 minutes. So having like, I've had like, 6 or 8 people in a gondola doing partner exercises, where they're having a sentence stem, that they're speaking through with each other or sharing something that they're wanting to get out of the trip or some other process. And I just love it. One of the things I was diagnosed with ADHD. And for me, what that means is I have multiple points of attention. Like I like complexity. I like to be tracking time while tracking the room, while tracking someone's emotional experience. It's like being in, like playing sports. Like if you play soccer or some kind of sport where there's a lot going on, it's like you're fully engaged. So being in a gondola with 8 people doing process work, trying to make sure we finish by the time we get to the door opening is pretty.
You feel right at home there.
Yeah. I feel engaged.
There's something about this being at the top of a mountain or over a canyon or the sea or something. This experience of awe. I'd love to have you comment on, because when we're in a room or when we're in our own problems or when we're just seeing what's right in front of us, it can seem like there's so much, but having a higher perspective, there's so much different types of insight that can come from it. Like if you were, for example, to think of, if you were to look at Earth from outer space and see there's a pandemic happening, it's just like, oh, there's a pandemic happening on that planet. And it becomes this less of a personal thing. Like, oh my gosh, gotta avoid getting it. What are your thoughts about like how this feeling of awe, changes our perceptions or changes how we view the world?
I love the question. Can I share with you a model that I use in my coaching that would give some insight on that?
Yeah, please.
So I call it the 3 voices. I categorize all of our thoughts and feelings into 3 categories of voices or thoughts. Same thing. The first is emotional, and that's anything that has a physical contraction of muscles in the body. So when those voices or thoughts happen, including fear, the eyebrows might move or the body might lean or you might have your hands, clenched. Then there's analytical voices, or thoughts, which are characterized by a twist of skepticism. They need proof to believe something. They, science or coding or spreadsheets are good uses of the analytical mind. It's, it's accurate, right? It doesn't do well with things that are unclear or vague or where you have a sense of it, right? The third category of voices I call the inner knowing, and they're characterized by a feeling of love when it speaks, and people can call that the soul's voice. People call it the true self. And when you have awe, I would say that you would enter into the state of the inner knowing, which is like a surrender. It's like a beauty. It's like an exhale, like, oh, wow. Like that, I feel so perfect right now. Like, look at that view. Look at the nature that we're looking at. Can you believe that this exists? Like maybe I love looking at ferns, what do you call the fractal type of growth of the curling part of the.
Yeah, well, it's just I'm actually going to show you my tattoo. I have the Fibonacci
Yes,
spiral on
yes,
my
the Fibonacci spiral.
tattoo.
Yes. So when I was young, I would love looking at the little curled up ferns, and it's just like, wow, this is amazing. And in that moment, I believe that the analytical, emotional voice is quiet, and that's a really hard thing to do. Sports does it for us often, adventure sports specifically, right? But meditation's hard to sometimes get away from those parts. But awe can just boom put us right there, and it's a beautiful thing because I think it's not easy to drop into that state on a day-to-day basis for many people.
What was the first time you remember experiencing that inner knowing voice?
Well, I would say that taking psychedelics in college definitely got me there. I don't know if I really had it before then. My youth was characterized by frequent rage and intensity and very analytical. Like I was really good in math. Like I was always just computing everything. So I don't know that I really surrendered those emotional and analytical parts. And well, actually, that's not true. I did do whitewater rafting and snowboarding, but I don't have memories of having like peak experiences, because for me, the inner knowing can also be a voice. It can be a feeling or a voice where you always, like I remember the first time I took psychedelics, or maybe the second time, I was like, oh man, I have not really been a nice person all the time. In fact, maybe I've been pretty selfish a lot of the time. And that was just like a truth bomb, you know?
And that felt sort of like an awe type of feeling to see that perspective of yourself?
Well, I would say this. I would say that awe can bring us into the inner knowing, but I wouldn't characterize the inner knowing as a feeling of awe. I would say it's a feeling of truth and a feeling of softening, and maybe a feeling of compassion.
Can I ask what psychedelics you started using?
I first started with MDMA, and oh wait, did I say? Well, I first started with marijuana, as a hallucinogen, and then that was at 18. Also at 18, MDMA. Once, I think for Halloween, I went to a rave in a warehouse, and ate mushrooms and took LSD later in that year. And it was the LSD in which I had the real awakening of, I had this vision of the footsteps behind me that I had left on the planet were black, and I wanted them to be white. More purity, more positivity, because I felt like in my heart I was a good person, like I have good values, but because I was just full of rage a lot and just intense, it often came out in this way that wasn't really nice,
Yeah. Could you talk about where do you think the rage in your youth came from?
So I believe that because I had 5 siblings and that we were all 2 years apart, and I wasn't held enough. Not that my parents didn't love me, or my mom was carrying a newborn when I was 2 and having a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old also, and she said that I was very independent. I could dress myself and feed myself very early. So she was like, oh, wow, independent child.
An easy one.
Yeah. So, I think it's like when you're 3 years old and, or 4, let's say, and there's a 2-year-old and a newborn, and your words, like, what does a 4-year-old say at that point? Like, talk to me. I mean, can you even say, does it even have a full sentence? Probably. I want something, but I think, emotions are easier way to express what you want at that age. So I imagine I began to throw things and act out. I don't remember those years, but I do know that in my adolescent years and teenage years, there was a lot of acting out.
And does after sort of having this epiphany of wanting to leave white footsteps, how does acting out sort of is there still like some acting out that you do, like, and do you like channel it in some way now?
So it all kind of came to a head in college where I was taking a lot of psychedelics and I decided I needed better grades, so I quit everything. And first of all, smoking marijuana reduced the rage. So for a few years, I had dreadlocks and I had a beard and I was a hippie and I was going to Grateful Dead concerts and I was like, love everybody, right? But then when I quit all drugs, my third year of college, neurochemically, it was a lot of change. And I went to a psychiatrist who said, you need to find healthy risk. Because I ended up crashing my friend's car at 100 miles an hour and got caught shoplifting. So she's like, you need healthy risks. And I said, well, how about big wave surfing and whitewater rafting? She said, beautiful, go for it. So I then decided that was my saving grace. That was sort of I used to say surfing was my religion because it just did so much for my nervous system. But it didn't really, the rage didn't go away until 28. And I was able to learn how to notice my state of escalation and would use breathing exercises or self-talk to prevent the snapping. Because when you snap into rage, at that point, you lose rational decision making. And if you can de-escalate before then, you can just keep yourself under control. Yeah. So I learned how to do that.
So did you didn't grow up surfing then? It was like something you decided to take on so that you would have a risky outlet?
Well, I grew up snowboarding and whitewater rafting, and but they were still kind of like just occasional, activities. I went to school at UC San Diego, which is in La Jolla, and by great surfing. And my roommates, my second year, were all surfers, so we lived like half a block from the beach. So I started to learn to surf, but really. I just started to surf because that's what the guys were doing, but it didn't really click that this was something I needed, until I was told you have an issue with. Actually, I would diagnose it as kleptomania, which is a risk-taking compulsion. Stealing things is done because the people like the experience of the risk.
Oh, interesting. I never put that together.
Yeah.
And so I read the first chapter of your book, and you mentioned this psychologist or psychiatrist saying like you need to take risk, or she basically branded you like you're a risk taker. Somebody would have a choice. They could be like, yeah, that's me, or they could be like, that doesn't really fit. Like I don't think you're correct. But I thought it was very interesting that you sort of took that identity, like now I'm a risk taker, and it's been named, and sort of you branded yourself as a risk taker. So I thought it fascinating, and I see this a lot, how other people tell us we are, like, wow, you're so kind and loving, or wow, you're great at, acting, or any of these things. And you're like, okay, I am. And then you sort of take on that identity that somebody else has bestowed upon you. Any thoughts about how, just having someone tell you you're this way sort of set you onto the path of identifying more as a risk taker?
For me, or for just generally for people?
Yeah, for you in particular.
Well, I think it felt like truth. it was like, yeah, I mean, this is like definitely that 100% I am. And I love it. It's just, do you know the Enneagram?
Not super familiar, but I've taken the quiz at some point.
Yeah. So I'm the adventurer and I love being an adventurer. I love it. I would like, it's like, I often, like to talk about things like, well, is it really right for us to be in offices 8 hours or 10 hours a day? Like, well, how about 6 or how about 4? How would it be if businesses required their employees to be physical or in nature for 4 hours a day or 2 hours a day? Like that was a part of your job. What would the world be like? So for me, I've long, what happened for me in my career path was, I worked as a river guide, while I did neuroscience research, and then I became a ropes course facilitator, and then my student loans became, the deferment ended, and I needed to make money, and there was a real estate boom happening, so I went into real estate, and I started working, 16, 20 hours a day, and I thought, okay, I'm making good money. I'm going to go on a surf trip every weekend because if I don't, I'm going to lose my mind with how much I'm working, right? Yep. And then I started traveling the world surfing, and that became just like an amazing learning experience and just really rich experience. So, then it was like, well, how can I work from these surf trips? So I started figuring out, how to work remote. And I just.
So you were trying to do real estate deals remotely while surfing?
Well, I was mostly doing mortgage financing, but I also started doing my own investing. And yes, I would be in Ecuador. I went to Costa Rica in 2000 and thought, wow, this place is amazing. There's just too many Americans here. I'm going to go find the next Costa Rica. I went to Ecuador and traveled around the coast, like most of the southern coastline, and tried to find another, amazing surf spot that was undiscovered. And I had this little Nokia phone, and I would plug it into my computer and send emails. It was really slow, but I didn't need a lot of money, to live like that. But yeah, I eventually moved down there and spent a month working from my laptop there, and decided it wasn't the right thing.
That was so this is the early 2000s, so pre 4 hour work week. So really before there was sort of any community around like how to do this stuff.
Yes. I still haven't read 4 Hour Work Week, but I believe in it.
Yeah. I didn't realize, that book really just opened my eyes to so many possibilities. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. That's amazing. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a business necessarily, so I had to start a business so I could do that. So let's, where do I want to go? I want to ask you a little bit about, because so at some point, you were running the Live Ignited and taking people out on adventure trips and sort of coaching them. But as we were talking sort of before we hit record, you're kind of moving more towards these sort of weekend intensives and the one-on-one coaching. So maybe you could talk about sort of the sort of the rise and now maybe sounds like pivoting away from these group adventure trips.
Sure. So when I was 19, I feel like I started getting access to my inner knowing. And it told me at 19, you're here to do something great in the world. And so I was kind of like, all right, sure, of course, I want to do something great. But I don't know what that
Okay,
that
fine.
is. But it wasn't like you telling me what it was. So, in 2006, after 6 years of real estate, I was like, you know what, this isn't my thing. I'm doing well, but I don't feel like it's using my skill set. So I asked my friends, what do you think I should do? And one couple said, you should be a therapist. You saved our marriage. You're really good at figuring out people. And I did feel like I had a knack for knowing people. So I decided to become a coach and went to University of Santa Monica's master's program in spiritual psychology. And the first day I was there, actually the like informational seminar was, I got this download that I'm going to combine adventure sports and personal development. So my second year project was launching a prior iteration of Live Ignited, a different kind of business model, which was more about doing healing, more healing oriented, where it was just the concept of healing, I think, is a little bit different than coaching, you know? Mm-hmm. So, and it didn't quite stick. And then I did the Live Ignited for a couple of years. And again, there was something for me that wasn't my highest joy, my greatest expression of joy in that. And I was simultaneously working one-on-one, but I was listening to this inner knowing that I'm to combine these two modalities. You know, what is it about being in, because being in nature and doing adventure sport has transformed my life, probably more so than even the psychedelics, equally probably important for me, and equally important as any therapy I've done, which is a lot, you know. And so I was just trying to figure out, well, what is it about adventure sports and nature? What are the parts of that I need to combine with the types of transformational modalities that I am teaching that makes it potent? And what I've come to is adventure sport as a spiritual practice, that when we go into flow state because of risk, that we enter into a simulated samadhi, or a forced samadhi. Like if you jump off a cliff on your snowboard or your skis in the air as you're in free fall, in that moment, it's pure bliss. Well, if you didn't exit the line properly, you could be scared. But if you hit it straight, you're in a moment of total exhilaration and clarity, and you're free from the mind. So when you experience that, it provides you with an understanding of what a no mind state is. And then you can begin to search for that through meditation or other means. Additionally, I believe that the more of our day that we spend out of the mind, not thinking, the more integrated we become. It's that overthinking is one of the biggest, or overly emotional patterning are the biggest obstacles to being in a state of integration or happiness. So I've come to look at it as doing adventure sports is a path to wisdom, a spiritual practice. And so I've kind of shifted to the book, expressing that, and taking clients out one-on-one to experience a variety of modalities, including adventure sports, in my weekend intensives, because the group in the groups, the style of work that I do, it's just harder to do. I'm more of a one-on-one facilitator, or with a couple. I can work with partners in business or life, but once there's a bunch of people around, I'm still developing some processes that can do that type of work for larger groups. But my greatest joy is sitting with one or two people and diving in with them.
And I just want to say, like, if the listener is hearing a bunch of thunder, we're having a storm roll through over here. So it was like really intense right outside my windows. And it sounds like what you're saying is there's an access point to this no mind state through, like, once you can go and experience it through adventure sport, and then when you're meditating, or it gives you like a place to like shoot for, like, okay, I've experienced this once in this sort of free fall moment, which doesn't last super long, But it allows you to try to get back to that no mind state.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I think for many people, they've never experienced a break from their thoughts. Their just thoughts are bombarding their awareness constantly all day from when they wake up, when they go to bed. So when you ask them to try and meditate or not think or observe their thoughts, it's just impossible for them. So,
it's almost it's like they don't even understand, what that means necessarily.
Yeah, and it could be longer than going off a cliff. I mean, if you're skiing at high speed or mountain biking down a trail at high speed, the whole time that you're at speed, you could be experiencing that.
Yeah, because you have to be sort of fully immersed in the. Yeah, there's something. What's coming up for me actually is there's like maybe a part way to do it, and it's going back to hiking or low speed activities when, or even showering, when people get these sort of brainstorms in the shower, these eureka moments. Like if you're going at speed, skiing at speed or mountain biking at speed, you're super immersed. But when you're doing it half speed, you're partly immersed, but that allows enough for you to sort of like trickle out these insights. So it's almost like a partial removal of the mind. I'm just sort of free flowing here, but
yeah. So if you're moving at a pace or doing like cooking, like let's say when you do a stir fry, I like to do stir fry on like electric stove on 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 10 or right, it's really hot, so I could flash fry things, and there's not time to think. You have to I'll put all my ingredients out, already chopped up, ready to go, and I'll just throw them in, and keep moving the stir fry, so it doesn't burn. And if I stop and think, then things are going to burn. So if it's mountain bike riding, then at a certain speed, your brain will begin to wander. Your analytical mind will begin to wander. And if that's happening, it might be in the way of having an aha insight, because then we get caught up in an analytical process versus having an open space for a more profound process.
Yeah, this is cool. I'm just reflecting on my own experiences, because I've done slow speed activities like canoeing across the lake or walking, and then super high speed activities, skiing, or anytime you're just falling or controlled fall or something like that. That's interesting. The component of speed. I'd like to learn a little bit about the, because when I was poking around, you still have the Live Ignited website up, and you had a board of directors on there, and I was actually curious about the structure of that business.
So the advisors are people who I don't know if it's at board of directors or board of advisors.
Advisors,
yeah. Yeah, are people who are close friends of mine who I respect and value their input on, and have counseled with to help decide, how to design that business. I mean, I don't know if you've done retreats, but they say that, retreats are not really great business for profit. The numbers often are just challenging to make work. So, some of it might have been, trying to design a business model or discussing, ideas on personal development. And so I listed all of them there because they've contributed and they're people I care about. And
that was cool. I hadn't necessarily seen that. And so I have led some adventure trips, and I agree. Once you get the marketing, if you can fill trips consistently, then you're great. But that's a big pain point for a lot of people that want to just be facilitating. They just want to enjoy the trip. Well, there's also the putting it together and running it and being the responsible party and all these things, and it sort of takes away some of the enjoyment. But I had a similar, I had a mandate from an 800-year-old tree that was communicating with me telepathically. I went in the jungle and it gave me this. I had this whole long experience with the tree where it did like some sort of astral projection thing where it sent my body to a different location and then gave me this mission to take people into the wilderness. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll start an adventure tour company. I've run like 4 or 5 of these trips. But it really is, I actually canceled this one that I was going to do this year, partly because of the virus, but also because it's it can take a lot of work to make one come off successfully, which, getting people to commit to doing that, months in advance is one of the hard parts too.
Yeah. Yeah. And what comes up for me as you talk about it is something that I've never done or never tried to lead, but I imagine that the best adventure, the most powerful transformation would be a vision quest of like a fasting in wilderness.
Yeah.
So it's not a like how nice is the villa and getting the super nice van that's got air conditioning and the logistics that people leave a review that says, wow, every detail was thought about, but actually I sat in the dirt by a tree for 4 days and I realized that I need to stop doing X, Y, and Z and start doing A, B, and C. Is probably, I think, the most potent wilderness trip.
So the marketing for that, like, we guarantee, like, you will have no lodgings. Like, we guarantee, there'll be complete
we
lack of
guarantee the
support.
most potent transformation of your life. But see, so for me, like, my inner knowing is told me that, that the mission that I'm on with respect to nature is encouraging people to develop a life practice of being in nature, doing an activity that involves gravity, wind, waves, and or water, and that they do it weekly. Because that one time that you climbed Machu Picchu back when you were in college, that you continue to remember and lean on as the thing that proved to you that you can defeat all of the demons in your mind or whatever.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's one way. That's one way to do it. And if you do a mountain, like I've climbed only 1 or 2 peaks, which are really potent experiences, but if you do one every couple of years, if you climb another mountaintop every 2 or 3 years, I would say great. That's a super potent practice. But to do it once when you're young and then say, oh, I did that, or to do a vision quest once and say, oh, I did that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there's certain value there, and there's other value in having it be a regular practice. For me, in my nervous system and personality type, like right now I'm living in Puerto Rico and I'm surfing every day, and it's rare. It's probably not since college have I been doing an adventure sport every day like this, and I feel like so lit up. It's just
Yeah.
it's been one of the most valuable things for me to be locked down somewhere where I can't go on a plane and go somewhere where I got to go in the water every day because there's nothing else to do right now. And it's been such a joy for me because, I lived in San Diego prior to 2008, and I surfed every day probably. I mean, I was living by the beach maybe, 4 days a week. But when I moved to LA in 2008, it's not really a surf town. Mm-hmm. There's surf, but it's just like traffic and crowded. So I kind of stopped surfing. And so the last 12 years I've been kind of like wandering in the desert, like where's my place? And being here back on the beach again, it's like, oh wow, I got to be on the beach or at a resort. I think a ski resort where I can just go out the door and get in an hour before work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we were looking. We live in St. Louis, but we were looking at mountain towns potentially. And when I was in grad school in Montana, I would ski at lunch. I would do a ski at lunch, and it was like, okay, there needs to be a mountain close enough that I can do that, because that was, you work all morning, take a ski break, work all afternoon. It feels great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
Totally. I mean, COVID for me has been kind of an eye opener of like, what is the life that I have been living, and what is the life that I really want to be living, and not putting it off. It's
interesting to see that you're sort of coming back to that same question, because I think you probably asked her that. You're talking about the Whitefoot, those were the black ones, and that was maybe an early insight, like, well, how do I want to live? But you're coming back to that same question. Is this, reassessing, what do I want to be doing?
Yeah, well, that question is, what is the kind of like the legacy that I want to live? How do I want people to remember me? How do I want to impact the world? This question is a little bit more like, what is the life that I've been working to build towards, and can I start doing that right now?
Mm-hmm. I want to I went to Costa Rica, and I was like, I want to live in Costa Rica like 20 years ago. Yeah.
And I told myself, well, let me make a bunch of money and I'll save up and move there. That was 20 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and that thought is still present for you. Mm-hmm. I want to jump back to your book for a second, which you're sort of in the middle of writing, but I got to read the first chapter. And there was something that struck me was you take these guys over some pretty epic rapids. But what struck me was these guys apparently they had their own businesses, or they're the boss of their own life, but they liked you yelling at them. They liked you leading them and like smacking them with the paddle and telling them what to do. And they were like, thank you for that. And it seemed like that's almost when I was a Boy Scout, and we used to go on these trips in week-long trips and in the Boundary Waters and backpacking and stuff like that. And my friends were like, you be the leader. And I was like, well, I don't really know what to do. So I would just like, read from the leadership manual and like tell them, okay, like here's what we're going to do. So it wasn't really leading, but can you share your thoughts on maybe what it felt like when those people were like, thank you for leading us strongly, and your thoughts on maybe leadership in general?
Sure. Well, what I can say is that that moment and other moments, being a river guide, professional river guide, as well as being a ropes course facilitator, people would say, oh my God, that changed my life. Thank you so much for that. You knew just what to say to help me overcome the obstacle. And no one ever said that to me in 8 years of selling real estate and mortgage financing. and that's one of the reasons why I left that industry, is I loved being appreciated. It was so nourishing. And that's what led me back to adventure and coaching. And, one of the things that I've explored in the personal development work that I've been in is something called surrendered leadership. I think that, there's a lot of directions we could go around leadership. Wherever it interests you, I'm open to it. But, I think that one of the things, like, so when you're leading rafting customers, they get in the boat and you say, okay, look, I'm going to instruct you on how to paddle, and I'm going to instruct you on when to paddle. And when I say stop, I want you to stop paddling and put the paddle in your lap, and I'm going to steer the boat. And it's very important that you do this, because if you don't do this, you could fall in the water and die. So there's a really interesting dynamic where people are like, okay, I got it. Um, and I enjoy leading. I think that I can remember back in college, you know, feeling uncertain about leading because I had been gotten feedback that I dominate conversations and I'm always the one trying like speaking over people. So I was trying to be less of the leader so I could let other people be involved.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed is that oftentimes if there's a person in a group that is the natural leader, people will want them to lead. And if that person is not leading, no one else will really step up and the group will kind of be lost in the leadership experience because there's a feeling of like there's a leader here and they should be leading. So since I've kind of decided if I feel like I'm the leader in a group, then I'm just going to lead and not let the probably emotional voice of fear say, oh, what if somebody judges me for being a bad leader? Or what if somebody judges me for taking up the bandwidth of the group? Maybe I should be small and hide so I don't be judged, you know? So
Yeah, that's super powerful because there is a lot of, especially in people who have some sort of platform, a podcast, or they're influencers or things like that, there's a lot of peer pressure to speak up about this or that and take a stand on something. And, you know, if we're seeing like a bunch of different issues all at the same time, like, oh, you better be taking stands on all of them. And there's a lot of, I think, pressure to make something pertain to you and speak up about it. And, you know, personally, people always ask me, because I used to be a virologist, actually. They're like, oh, wow, you know, COVID times, you know, you must be super excited to weigh in on this. And I actually really haven't at all, because it, you know, seems out of my wheelhouse or out of alignment with what I'm doing. So, yeah, I really like that. Do what is yours to do.
Yeah, do what is yours to do and do that which you cannot not do. Though if you can find something that you cannot not do it, then you know that's a definition of devotion in this community that I'm in. But I wanted to say another thing about what you were saying a moment ago, which is that what I believe the world needs today and what is going to make a shift in the world today is to have a larger percentage of the world be able to hold and understand and see multiple conflicting perspectives simultaneously. It's a concept that I learned through the integral theory ideas, of which Ken Wilber is one of the primary authors in that movement. And the idea is that in the earlier stages of development, as we go, and this is from Spiral Dynamics, as a person and a culture evolves, we reject and judge the prior stage of evolution, those people that we judge as being less evolved than us. Like you could say, you're a racist. Like you don't get it. Like you need to love everybody, you know? Or people might say, you know, to that person, well, I won't take it in that direction, but so the earlier stages of development are in Spiral Dynamics. They're tier 1. And tier 1 is characterized by judging the prior stage. Tier 2 is what's called integral consciousness. And in tier 2, we begin to see that multiple perspectives can be correct simultaneously. And when you can look at it from that perspective, there's not a clear right wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's how we can solve problems. Because if I'm right and you're wrong, then nothing gets done. So I think that personally, I get caught up in trying to see all of the different perspectives, and that's a benefit, but it also can cause me to not be in action, because I'm like, well, this is really complex. I mean, we're dealing with people who are uneducated and people who are corrupt, and we're dealing with people who are scared, and everyone's acting out of, defensiveness. And the issues, it's like I can't blame any of those people. We need more education. We need time, and it's not like there's an answer versus like, you're being racist, that needs to stop, and we need laws that remove the power from the police because they're the ones that are, that's like a very clear, like, that's an actionable step, when really it's not an actionable step. It's a really maybe not smart step to eliminate the police,
Yeah. And I see what you're saying. And, so it sounds like stage one of this is like you place some judgment on a certain way of thinking. And what that seems to do is it like creates this separateness, like you're different from me and I'm judging you. And if you can see all the perspectives, then there's not necessarily this separateness between us.
Yes. And I would imagine that what is underlying the problem of againstness is trauma and pain. That when you do trauma work, when you do healing work, you enter into a place of forgiveness and acceptance and love, and that is needed for these problems to be fixed. I mean, anyone who is, acting racist and blatantly like saying other people should die, they're clearly hurt. And anyone who's trying to just have power and just try and have money and control, and they're not doing it because they're racist, they just want to stay having all their money and their nice life, well, they probably are trying to comfort their own wounds from having had a difficult childhood or disappointments in life or whatever were the things that made them decide, I'm going to prove it to everyone. I'm going to be successful. There's an insight that I got in a plant medicine journey that for men and maybe for women, that those who have kind of an overactive ambition, who are just trying to achieve more and more and more, were probably not held enough as a child. Because when we're held and when we feel safe and when we feel loved, our focus is more on connection and relationships than it is on success and power. And that the striving to have more money, power, sex, control, nice things is all an attempt to try and recreate the warm, safe feeling of being held.
Because then you could just buy somebody to come cuddle you.
or like a big house. It feels like being cuddled. You're in your nice sheets and you're in your nice bed and you have your temperature controls and you have the nice view, and it's like, I'm gonna put my feet up and have a drink and just enjoy, and it's or even a nice car, like, I got this car, and I feel happy when in fact, I had this coaching session. I had just gotten an Audi and I had this coaching session, and my coach is like, think of something that makes you happy. And I was, in a difficult part of my life, and I was like, I can't think of anything, because I wasn't surfing, and it's like, driving my Audi. When I drive my Audi, it just feels so good, and it's true. It just feels soothing. It just feels like, these things can provide us with experiences that approximate the feeling of being held, where you can just kind of exhale. And so if anyone's looking for a prescription to reduce their ambition, more being held by someone who you can just fall apart in their arms, and it's
I'm chuckling because my wife is like, I have a much higher desire for cuddles than she does. She'll be like, "All right, like, time's up. Like, let's go to sleep." And I'm like, like, and so we'll creep all the way over to her, like, very edge of the bed. I'm trying to get closer. She's trying to edge away from me. I'm noticing. I'm looking at the time here. We're about an hour in. So let me see if actually one thing I wanted to touch on is in your book you talk about the 6 stages of risk. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that, because we did talk about the free falling moment, the sort of moment where you lose your thoughts. Would you like to talk about those 6 steps?
Sure. So the first step is inspiration. And what I talk about in the book is, you don't necessarily want to do all of the risks that come in front of you. Like if you're going to, race someone in your car because he says you're chicken and you need to prove that you're not, like that might not be smart, right?
Yeah.
So learning to discern the origin of the inspirations is key. The inner knowing, if you can have it be readily available, it's going to be the best place to choose to listen to. And then indecision is next. The analytical and emotional voices begin to debate whether or not you should do the inspiration that has come up. And that can derail your process. Like Costa Rica, I had an inspiration to move to Costa Rica 20 years ago, and I haven't done it because, maybe I need to make more money, or how am I going to have a job, or what is, too many Americans, there's just been a lot of voices preventing me. Maybe it's Hawaii, and, maybe it's Ecuador, so, but if there's a true inner knowing, inspiration, it will continue to whisper, Costa Rica, Costa Rica. And it's still whispering to me.
I heard Rica, it. I just heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like even last week, 2 weeks ago, it's like, so, and then there's commitment. We decide.
Actually, can I jump in here really quick?
Yeah.
If somebody is dealing with the uncertainty and the 2 voices are like talking them out of it, is there anything you do for people to sort of like get them past the uncertainty?
Yeah. So the first step is, if you like my model, and you don't have to, there's other models that work, to agree, okay, I'm going to look for the inner knowing, and I'm going to look for the analytical and the emotional, so I can know where I am inside myself and who's talking, because the emotional voices are younger parts of us. You could have like, and it's not a problem. It's just who we are. So, if I could use the example of the cuddling with your wife, like that could be a younger part of you that has a desire to feel close, right? You look like you're in your 30s or so. So, maybe that's in your 20s, teens, or adolescent years, right? And if she says no, you might say, "Oh, come on," right? Like a younger, right? So it's like, there's nothing wrong with a younger voice, but is that the voice that you want to guide you in your decisions of taking risks? Is it, do you want a younger you at the helm, right? So the first step is to identify, well, who is it? And then the second step is to make friends with it. Instead of making them bad and wrong and trying to push them away, we want to get to know these parts. Like how old do you think the cuddling one is, if you had to guess, inside of you?
I think that's probably something I've always enjoyed, so probably quite young.
Try young, cool. So 5, let's call it, right?
Yeah.
So you may have a 5-year-old that's forever in your life. So we need to just accept that and just give them time and space to get their needs met. Because if we try and deny it, that's when we end up with repression and struggle and emotions coming out sideways, right? So we just, you know, if your wife is getting impatient with you, you might tell her, hey, look, so I got a 5-year-old that wants to cuddle. When you don't want to cuddle, can you just think of me as a 5-year-old rather than just roll over and say, go to bed? How would you talk to a 5-year-old? But you can also do that with your own 5-year-old. You could say, let's think of an example. So Costa Rica. Okay. So, I have a voice that says go to Costa Rica, and another voice is like, oh, all those Americans. Oh my God. Like I like travel to get away from Americans. Like what, why are there so many Americans? I don't want, and then it's like, I'm going to dialogue with that voice. All right, well, tell me what's wrong with Americans. Well, they're insensitive. They're bossy. They're know-it-alls. They're selfish. They're sloppy. They're not refined. They're just, and I don't want to be categorized with them. I don't want to be seen as an American. It's embarrassing. I want to, like, I would like tell people I'm from Mexico because I speak Spanish, which works in certain countries, but not in Spanish speaking countries. And then just give that voice center stage, allow it to be heard, and just say all of its fears. And then it's like, okay, I'm done, complaining about Americans, and that voice will quiet down. And then it's like, okay, what's here now? Well, I'm afraid, what if I move to Costa Rica and I don't know how to make money? And I don't have a lot of money. What if I just don't have a nice, comfortable life? And then again, give that voice airtime. Let it speak and express all of its thoughts and feelings. And then
that's like a different separate voice entity than the don't like Americans voice.
Right. And you could have like a dozen of these different parts that are contributing to indecision. And these are the emotional rational parts I call our human self. And then the inner knowing is like our spiritual self. And the human self exists because of how we were raised. You might hear your dad's voice like, you're never going to make it by yourself down there. You need your family in order to thrive. And you hear, I'm never going to make it without my family. Oh, it sounds like my dad. What? No, right? Because you heard it so many times. It's just your subconscious playing out the ideas that it absorbed in its attempt to try and figure out how to survive and be a successful person in the world. So growing up, we take on all of these beliefs based on either trusting the person who taught us that, or through trauma because we resisted something that we decided was unsafe. So it could be that one time we got lost at Disneyland and couldn't find our family, and then forever we thought it's unsafe to be away from our family. So then when we try to go to Costa Rica, a voice goes, oh my gosh, I'm going to be unsafe because my family's not nearby. And so all of these human parts, I call it our human parts because kind of people say like humans are faulted by nature. I don't know if you've heard that concept, but it's to be human is to be, what is the phrase?
I don't know. What, messy? It's messy to be human? I don't know.
Or like foibles, human foibles, like just like, I don't know. There's this concept I picked up, which is that humans are faulted just by nature. We're not perfect. And so all of our human faulted parts, I would really question, is this really true? Is this still true for me today? Do I still believe that being away from my family is unsafe, like I thought when I was 7 at Disneyland? But it's in the subconscious, so it feels hard to really separate from. And this, I think, is a struggle of most people. Their subconscious thoughts and feelings are so powerful they cannot choose another path. They cannot make decisions outside of what that programming says. And when we learn to observe it and notice, okay, well, that seems like it's analytical. And I know from Stefan's model, the analytical is to be questioned and the emotional is to be questioned. So, okay, let me look into that. Where does that feel true to me today? No, it doesn't feel true. Okay, I'm going to put it aside.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, the only reasons not to go to Costa Rica are the Americans and the fear of not being away from my family. Oh, and then there was the money thing. Am I going to be able to make money? Right. So then you go back, well, go to Costa Rica because I love surfing, warm water on the beach, and it's paradise. Like, that sounds amazing. I'm going to go do that. Right. And you get back in touch with the inspiration. Like, yeah, I want that. I want that more than I believe these other limiting thinking, right? So, journaling could help with that. Of course, working with a coach or therapist, but even just calling a friend. Like, I encourage my clients to just call your friend and say, look, I'm going to vent some limiting beliefs. I don't want you to ask me any questions about them or, give me your opinions of them. Just listen. And when I'm done, we're just going to end the call and move on or talk about something else. There's no dialogue about these voices. We're just letting them, it's like a pressure release valve. We're just letting them vent out. Mm-hmm. I've unweighted myself of their grasp.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So we've got the commitment, and then we already talked about the free fall and the landing, and then integration.
So landing is really cool. Like, let's think of one that you've been through, where you went through a free fall, and you landed, and your whole body is lit up, and you're like, wow, I just did that, and I feel this rush of endorphins, and maybe your mind is altered a bit, and you're like, what can you think of something that you did?
Yeah, something. Like jumping off a waterfall is a good one.
Cool,
because it can be pretty scary.
Yeah. So I imagine the landing experience is like between 5 minutes and an hour for a waterfall, maybe a day, mm-hmm. where you feel different. You feel more expanded.
There's that Machu Picchu example. So is this like you can like recall that experience? Like, wow, I didn't know I could do it, and then I did it. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
There for 5 minutes to up to a day after the waterfall jump. Can you remember feeling expanded in your state of like where it's not like a thought, like I did it, but it's a feeling of like just elevation.
And I think the first thing is like, and then you shout to the people that are at the top of the waterfall, like, it's amazing. Like, you have to jump,
Yeah. Right.
I don't know.
So it's amazing. You have to jump. Like, it's an inspired voice that you just express. It's amazing. Where on top, you were not that way.
Right.
There was a shift in you. So there's the pre-jump nervousness. Then there's the free fall in the moment.
Yep.
And then there's the landing elevation of like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Let me help you. I'll buy you, an ice cream later. I'll take you, I'll carry you down the trail if you do it. Like, you have become more generous or positive or right. You're like a better version of you for an hour or 10 minutes or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And that state, the landing state is my favorite of all of the states because the free fall is typically short. And it can also be really intense. It's like some of the things that I do are really scary. And in the moment, it's like, it's like I can now, like in free fall, you can't really engage people. You're just in the moment. But in landing, you have like a certain percentage of the free fall state still happening in your system. But then you can interact and you can be with people like Burning Man. Mm-hmm. like after Burning Man,
I haven't been to
there's
Burning Man
just,
yet.
oh, you haven't been? Okay. You
Probably
mentioned
a
it.
lot of listeners have. I keep it's on the list every year, but
I imagine, I mean, that at Burning Man, this is a whole different kind of paradigm because there's immediacy is one of the values. Do what you, I think that's what it means. Do what you want to do without hesitation.
hmm.
Don't be like, oh yeah, tomorrow let's go see the man. It's like, you want to go see the man, go see it right now because it may not be there tomorrow, or why wait? Just, take the moment. It's like, but there's also like, expression and inclusion. There's encouragements to just do life in a way that could feel like risk. So afterwards, I imagine a lot of people could say they've done a lot of things they wouldn't normally do and probably feel this like exhilaration that hopefully lasts 355 days.
Get you through to the next Burning Man.
And then integration is the more that well, it could be a couple things. The more that I take risks and experience this, the more that the landing phase integrates into who I become. Like, could you imagine if you jumped off a waterfall twice a day?
You become pretty good at it.
But you would also become that positive person that's like, hey, you should do it. I'll buy you an ice cream. I'll take you to dinner. I'll give you a back rub I think you're gonna love it. Let me help you. Like there's a
yeah.
I mean, honestly, I like the idea that we work in offices 40 hours a week for 40 years and all that, and then we go on vacations for 2 to 3 weeks a year and go jump off waterfalls, for me is crazy. Like we should be jumping off waterfalls every day and then working in between the waterfalls.
So I had a housemate. We had a pool when I lived in Bali, and his room was on the second floor, and he would jump. There was like a little roof above my room, and the pool was outside my room, and so he would walk onto my roof and jump into the pool at sunrise, and it would like splash against my window, and I would hear him like whooping and hollering, and it would wake me up every morning.
Yeah. So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, then I'd be like, oh, I gotta go jump.
Yeah.
Too. It was, but you had to do kind of like a pin drop. You couldn't, because then you just jump right over the whole pool. So you gotta just right down into it.
And what were the benefits?
Yeah, I mean, every day you're just like, fuck yeah, let's go, just like make some cool shit happen today.
Right. After you jumped in, you were like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do anything.
So, right. So do you feel like jumping in that pool for days and days on end eventually like integrated something into who you are and who you've become because of those experiences?
Sure. Yeah. And I think also having a podcast with adventure in it, everybody's, and this goes back to what we were talking about where people give you an identity. Well, this podcast sort of gave me the identity, and then people will be like, hey, aren't you the adventure guy? Like, shouldn't you do this thing? Like shouldn't you be the first one to jump or huck or whatever? And then once you do that for many years, you're just like, okay, I'm the adventure guy. Like, all right, I'll just lead, I'll just do it first and prove that I'm not going to die. And then, so yeah, it does become this big integrated thing where you have to be adventurous.
Yeah. And so my theory is that, you can break free from the programming and the constraints of the human parts in the free fall, in the landing, and you get to have more say in how you be, in who you be. And that's integration for me also is a statement of I'm becoming whole. And whole is like I don't create drama in my life. I don't create conflict. I don't, I'm able to set goals and achieve them. I'm able to express myself in ways and I'm able to support other people and show up in a positive way, in the way that I want to be. Like for me, you know, when I took LSD for the first time, I was not integrated. I was not showing up in the world in the way that I wanted to be. There was a part of me that wanted to be a good person that left a trail of purity in my wake. And it's taken, you know, 25 years. And I feel like this year, COVID and some other things have really kind of finally got me to a point of feeling like I've integrated a lot of things that were kind of coming out sideways, you know? And there's always more to do, I think, for me at least. But, you know, so integration being that I like this definition that just kind of came up, which is that I can live my life the way that I want to be.
Yeah. I think that's a really great place to wrap. And it makes me happy to hear like this. It's almost like you've completed this cycle of your journey to feel like you're leaving white footprints. So yeah, Stefan, thank you for coming on the show, and this conversation flowed in a lot of ways, and that was really enjoyable. So where can people find out more about you and find you online?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun. I'd love to chat more or do it again. My website is stefangrafstein.com, StefanGrafstein.com. And I would love to hear questions or comments, positive or negative, about things I shared today.
Right on. Yeah, much appreciated. And I feel a connection. We're very very similar paths and business models to some degree. So yeah, it was great to talk with a fellow adventurer, coach, facilitator, etc.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Cool, man. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Bye.